And you haven't been the same since.
No, no. Trust in God, lock your car.
Yeah.
So you were delivered by Santa Claus instead of by a stork.
Yeah, that's what they claim.
Or something.
Right. You must have hit your head. Santa dropped you.
Yeah. Uh,
Okay.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. It's a nice day out here in the Lincoln area. I think Todd said it's nice in York, so
Yeah,
I
beautiful.
feel bad for having you guys inside right now, but
Best time of the year.
right. Okay, it's just a little after 12. I've started the recording of this tree planting and care webinar. Welcome to our, what is it, October version of tree planting and care webinar by the Nebraska Forest Service. And we're really excited today to have Todd Faller from Faller Landscape in York. I don't know anybody who knows more about evergreens than you do, Todd, so this is really fitting.
Well,
We'll get over to
thank you.
Todd in just a minute. Plan to tune in next month, November 14th, second Friday of the month. We're going to talk about fall and winter tree care, what we can think about with our trees just going into fall and getting ready for winter. Any of you that have ISA or NAA certification CEUs on your mind, I will capture those at the end of the webinar. So we'll put those in the chat. And then also be aware, any of you that are interested in trialing some trees, the Nebraska Forest Service and statewide Arboretum have a batch of really uncommon, unusual trees that we're trying to goose the nursery industry and our public places with. And if you're interested in that, send me an email. We'll make those available yet this fall and mostly next spring. So some weird oaks from Colorado, even things like there's a magnolia we have in the pipeline. And then Todd, for your information too, we're going to make some of these seedlings available to nurseries to grow up and distribute and have them available to customers in their points too. So we'll get more information out about
Very
that.
good.
Yeah, I wanted to give you all an early heads up about that. All right, I think we're going to jump right into this. We're really fortunate, Todd. I've known Todd for, I don't know how long, Todd, 30 years or more.
Probably, yeah,
Yeah,
30 plus.
yeah, and I hate to guess how how long you've been doing it, but I do know you've been at it for decades. I've always been so impressed. One of my favorite nurseries to go visit and buy trees from is Faller Landscape in York. Todd,
Thank you.
yeah, in my personal opinion, Todd pays as much attention to root health uh, as anybody, and then he has so many unusual species. So I'd really encourage a visit to Todd's place there in York. And then, as I mentioned, conifers, Todd. I go personally a little hot and cold about conifers because it feels like here in eastern Nebraska we have quite a few problems with them. But then I see all the things that you're able to coax along, and I'm going, I got to do more with conifers. So thank you for chiming in today and joining us. And I think you're going to educate us real well about the things we can be growing on evergreens. How's that for a challenge?
Wow. Hey, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. I thank you for that introduction too. You're very kind. You rub off on me a lot too with your tree knowledge, so it's a mutual effort. Um, are you ready for me to start then, Justin? Is that?
Yep, go ahead,
Oh,
Eddie, and everybody online. I'll leave it up to Todd. Todd, do you want to answer questions as we go along? I could interrupt you, or we could
yeah, do
save them
that.
to the end.
Yeah, nope, just go ahead and stop me in between. So, yeah.
Okay, anybody listening, put them in the chat. I'll monitor the chat, and then if I have to, I'll interrupt Todd. But we'll have time at the end here for Q&A too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, like Justin said, evergreens, I also sometimes am hot and cold on them because there were only about three native conifers to this state, both junipers and ponderosa pine, and that was about it. So there was a reason they weren't growing here. But I since high school I've been playing with them, so I've experimented with a lot of them. and planted a lot of them in a pasture of mine to really give them the test. So I've gone a lot off of that. So I'll just go through a list. I have about 30 slides here, so just tell me if I'm running short on time. I'll try to keep moving along fairly quick. But yes, ask any questions, and I'll try to do my best to answer them. So on fir, first of all, that's my favorite group of them is the ABs, or the firs, the true firs. I think it mainly was because they were the most unknown. We know of concolor fir and Fraser fir as Christmas trees, balsam fir as Christmas trees, but few people know of some of these other fir that we've played with and been really pretty successful off and on, but more on than not. Just like any tree, the evergreens, it's kind of the right place to plant them also. I don't always recommend putting them out in a windbreak setting. So some of these would be more suited for maybe an acreage with some protection, or in-town yard with some protection, or a park where there's maybe some moisture off and on. I wouldn't recommend a lot of these just out in an open pasture like I did, but I wanted to give them a true test, and a lot of them were successful. So I know that with maybe a little more care, they can even be more successful. So, so back to the fir, the silver fir is just a gorgeous tree. You're going to hear me say a lot, this is my favorite tree. So this is my favorite tree. I'm going to start with this one. And when you have something for a Christmas bough or a swag, it's really hard to beat a noble fir, which doesn't grow here. I have tried that one, or a silver fir. And this is Abies alba. There's an Abies amabilis that is the Pacific silver fir. That one I don't have success with, but this one's from Europe, and really had done pretty well. You can see how protected that one is there. Zero. When we planted that 30 years ago, we put it in a windbreak setting here at the store, and you can see it. That's the northwest facing, so that's what it had, 1.5 miles of open field to fight. It had done really well until the winter, I think, of 2021, or whenever we had that winter where the wind blew from December to April almost day and night, and it burned it enough that we cut it down. So it was still alive at the bottom, but we moved on. But it might be one of those worthwhile in the Christmas tree industry. That's why I listed it. If you have irrigation in a drought year, it might suffer a little, but you could see on that it was growing a foot a year. So even in that setting, we did not water that, and it lived for 25 years like that. So anyway, something to consider, and just an outstanding, gorgeous tree. The Nordman fir, some growers have played with that one. I wouldn't put it in a windbreak maybe as much. They're Russian seed source, and I've had hit and miss where some growers say, yeah, they do well. No, they don't. I think it has a lot to do with seed sourcing. And I've had one here that's been growing almost 30 years and done well. It's in with some other trees. I planted some in my pasture again about 2 years ago, so we'll see how they do. I just wouldn't get carried away on them. I've seen gorgeous ones in I think it's either Crete or Friend that were planted by Rich Finke years ago for a customer, and beautiful trees, but they had some protection. So something to consider maybe for an in-town tree, but again, probably not. I don't know about a Christmas tree or a windbreak tree. Here's my favorite tree. Okay, this is the second one. Concolor are just outstanding. The nemesis with these is availability. We just cannot find enough available to sell, but it does very, very well in windbreak settings. I've put them under so much stress in dry sites. Once they're established, they do great. I don't know. I see Bruce might be on here. I don't know if that's Bruce from out McCook Way, if he's had experience with those, but I know we've sent some west. I think it's more towards Scotts Bluff and that direction. But love that tree. Gets really thick, great for habitat for birds. would work well for a Christmas tree. Growing wise, I just don't know, and the growers would know better than me how it holds up to needle drop in the house once it's been cut. I think I've tried a couple that we got from suppliers at Christmas tree time, and they just defoliate. So I don't know. That might have to do with where they come from, the seed source again, because there's about 4 or 5 seed sources on the concolors, and I like one from Cibola National Forest. That one seems to do really well here. So, but excellent tree.
Yeah, Todd, on
Yes.
those lines, I hear some people say you just got to avoid certain seed sources, like make sure it's from Colorado or something. Is that your experience, or is there?
Yeah. There's a couple of, I agree. Yeah. Cibola is great for that. I think that one is from Arizona, actually, either Arizona or New Mexico, but there's Santa Fe from New Mexico. I don't care for that one as much. There's a silver something that I don't care for. K-Bob, we've experimented with that one. That does all right. K-Bob National Forest. So yes, I agree. And then that brings up the point also, don't overwater them. They can take extreme drought, but they can't take heavy, wet, gummy clay soils. So you really have to watch the watering initially. Once they get established, like a lot of trees, they're more tolerant because there's more red base there. But yeah, seed source is important on a lot of things we're finding, and we're kind of liking that, especially with some shade trees anymore, like what Heather grows at her nursery. There's just a grouping at my pasture, so those have been there 30 years. That photo was probably taken about 5 or 6 years ago, I suppose. But look at that, for going through the drought of 2012, 2022, and you just can't tell. Where I was cutting down white pine and blue spruce in those drought years, these just kind of continued on.
I love
Love
that
that
picture,
tree.
Todd. Is there any problem planting these trees tight together? Do you have to worry about wind movement or disease or?
I haven't seen that. The only thing is you're going to have them die out, where they touch. But I've purposely been planting like balsam fir for myself in Canaan in this pasture. And I don't think I have them on this slideshow. I planted them 8 or 9 feet apart, so they purposely grew into each other because they were out in the pasture, and that way they got some more protection. So yeah, in the wild, they grow a foot apart. So the tree doesn't care. They like buddies again. Trees are in communities usually, so they like to have some friends around. And we're the ones that say, no, you've got to be a perfectly symmetrically shaped tree, no matter if you're a shade tree or an evergreen, and 40 foot apart. Well, that isn't what nature does. Korean fir, we've been really successful with Koreans. Slower growing, they call that the garden conifer because it only gets maybe 6 inches a year on average. They probably will level out in that 20 feet or so. They never stop growing, but they just don't get up there real fast. And I think, yeah, there's a picture of a grouping in my pasture again. And those are probably half the size of the concolors, I would guess, after 30 years. But a very distinct look. Look at that layering of just branches themselves. You can just tell a Korean by what the branch habit is. And the needle smells different. All the different evergreens have a different needle smell too. So sometimes if I'm a little confused what kind it is, I'll just break some needles and smell them. And Korean have that. Concolor has kind of a citrusy smell. It has its own. Balsam and Fraser and Canaan have their own Christmas tree fragrance to them. So you can kind of go by that a little bit on ID. But back to this, I don't think you can see it. There is a little bit of a white banding on the undersides of the needles, but overall it has a more of a greener look to it. And purple cones, when they do cone, and you can't see it on these older ones, but I have had them where they have the purple cones on there. They're very distinct and gorgeous cones and upright cones. So it's kind of fun to tell people when you have anything in that fir family, you'll never see a cone on the ground where spruce and pine do. They stand erect, and then the scales just disseminate on that cone when they mature. They never stay complete and fall to the ground. Yeah, so that's all I have on the fir, because I've kind of, I could talk 3 hours on this, so I'm really cutting this kind of. This is hard, Justin. A juniper, I just wanted to bring attention to. There's tons and tons of junipers, and I don't use much for junipers because I'm kind of tired of them. But nonetheless, this Trotman is a little more like a Western, our Rocky Mountain juniper. It has a little heavier branch structure. It berries more readily. I kind of like the berries on them. And as they branch, they aren't symmetrical like the Taylor juniper that we all know. So you see, and this is grown in Oregon at that Isley Nursery. I show their pictures quite a bit because that's an excellent website if you want to look through things too, and drool. But there you see the new growth shooting more upright, kind of like a missile, but here they shoot a little more at 45. So you see a little more of an erratic where they're going every other out. And that's what I like. It looks a little more rustic like our Rocky Mountain juniper. And again, you can see some berries on there too. And then the Taylors, of course, I like Taylors. I don't see them. Well, what happened this last winter, we had a lot of splitting and bending, and you just go, why are we growing these in this? Well, number one, they're native, so it's not like they can't take it. But we saw a lot of them that were grown improperly, where when we get some evergreens from other states, they don't keep the central leader. They'll shear them to make them full. So you see a lot of multi-leadering on them. You might have 5 tops in there. We try to trim that out. If we can't grow enough of our own and we have shipped some in, we try to trim them down to 1 leader. And you can see in these photos, these are ones we grew. Well, there's a single leader on all of those, and they're more easily combatant of storms like that, where you get a heavy wet snow and it bends the whole plant over, or it splits them open like we see arborvitaes a lot of times. I can't say all of these would have sprung back in that storm either. We did see some even that we grew kind of leaned out at 45s on top for a while. And then as the sun and weather changed, we got more sunlight as the season went on. It's amazing how a lot of those straightened up though. It's just incredible what trees do. We're so tempted to go out there and shake everything off. And I think, Justin, you've said that too in ice storms. Leave them alone. Don't do that, because that causes more damage. And we were saying that with that storm, and a lot of them did spring back. Others, when people were doing that, they were busting limbs, they were busting tops. So nature was doing this before we were doing them. So I usually err back to letting them just do their thing. Some that didn't straighten up, a side branch took off where it was vertical and grew straight. So we just cut that leader back to where the side branch had become the leader, and then it's straight again. So there's some things you can do to fix issues later on. Larch. I don't know. A lot of people don't know larch. Probably quite a few here in the group do, but larch are like bald cypress. They're a deciduous conifer, but less known. So that's why I kind of like doing them. We do maybe a dozen or so Japanese or American larch each year. We're kind of jumping to American larch because I figure it's from America. So we're doing something that's a little more native to the U.S. But they're kind of fun. They're fast growing. We'll get 2 to 3 feet of growth out of a young tree, kind of like bald cypress can do. But again, they're just different and very tolerant of cold. It isn't the cold that kills them, because they're native from really the Great Lakes state, north of the Great Lakes states up to the Arctic Circle. And where are other ones native? Well, Siberian, there's a Siberian larch. The Japanese larch like this is in higher elevations. So they can take cold just like most conifers are native to doing and taking. So turn beautiful yellow in the fall. Generally, every year we usually get good fall color. Our American larch is turning right now. Our Japanese are starting to turn right now. So they're a fast-growing, different tree. And there's the American larch. That is a recent one. I think that's an older picture again, but that same tree is quite large now. But beautiful fall color. And if you didn't know what's going on, that's when you start calling nurseries and say, my larch is dying. What do I do? You know, so it's kind of fun to say, you're perfectly fine. It's just fall color.
That really pops against those evergreens.
Yeah. 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 Looks bare in the winter, of course. So it wouldn't be very good for the Christmas tree industry. But okay, Norway spruce. I'm kind of torn on this one. I don't put this one out in the wide open very often. I still have some burn issues with Norway on bad winters. I like them for the fact that they grow a little quicker. They have really a distinct look to them too. They're dark green. They have pendulous sweeping branches as they get older. I just don't use them for windbreaks. We are using the Royal Splendor, which is out of North Dakota State, hit and miss in windbreaks. We're kind of experimenting with that. If it works for Todd West up there at 40 below, it really should work all right for us here. And so I'm kind of liking this Royal Splendor. And it isn't as broad and sweeping and pendulous in its branch habit like straight Norway, but that's kind of all right. Sometimes you get the big old Norways and they look a little ugly at the bottom, kind of like hoopsie spruce can do sometimes too. It gets where you see more branch and stem than needle color. So I'm kind of liking this Royal Splendor. If you want to do a Norway or something to diversify, this is probably the way we're going to start going, and less of the straight Norway. White spruce, I like white spruce. That's native to the Great Lakes states, so it does well here sometimes. And it's about as fast growing as the Norway, so it's a quicker growing spruce. Same cones as the Black Hill. The Black Hills is a white spruce, and we might have that slide on here too. But I just kind of diversify a little more to get a faster growing, more open look. Black Hills can be a little tight sometimes for me in a windbreak. I want it to just grow a little quicker, although both can be thrown in a windbreak, the Black Hills or the white spruce. And again, it isn't the cold that hurts these, it's the heat. As you move further south into southern Kansas, they struggle with spruce in general just because of the heat. So they're not really made for further south than us. They like to be north further. And I kind of remind my customers too, when you think of how much should I water an evergreen in general, or what can it tolerate? Well, where are they native to? They're native to higher elevations, mountain slopes, Fort Robinson in the tops of the Wildcat and Pine Ridge Hills. You know, they're growing in an inch of rock. It's so what does that tell you? Well, it isn't that they're after moisture most of the time. They'd rather be drier. Great Lake states are 100% sand a lot of times that they're growing in. So it isn't that we need to be pushing the water to them once they get established. It's more us that we think, well, I got to go water my shade trees or my shrubs, so I'm going to give these a drink too. And when we do a landscape, just in general, for easy to remember, and I give watering instructions at the end of it, I say, whatever we're doing deciduous, cut that in half for an evergreen. And so we're doing twice a week for a shade tree. Well, let's just do once a week for an evergreen, 2 weeks. And then after that, walk away, leave it alone until you think you need to, or if it's dry. If we're in the drought, yeah, there's factors that enter in, but we always mulch everything. And if you're ever in doubt, feel under the mulch. If it's damp and sticks to your finger, leave it alone, especially in clay, And I've gotten by real well with that recommendation. It's always easy to water, but you can't unwater. Yeah, and then there's the Black Hill spruce. So again, native to South Dakota. I think they have fossils of it being native into Northwest Nebraska, where we have the Pine Ridge and Ponderosa's native. So at one time it stretched into there, which only makes sense. It's kind of the same area, same environment. And so they can tolerate Nebraska really well, even Western Nebraska, obviously. The thing we're kind of watching, and I need to kind of see what the recommendations are from forestry and really anyone more in the know than I am on diseases. We're starting to see some diseases on blue spruce and Black Hill spruce with needle cast, some of the blights. I think in my theory, the more open they are, the more air circulation, just like anything, we have less of that problem. I've had needle cast on blue spruce on a couple occasions where they're like in a 6-foot picket fence backyard in town where there's just no air circulation. Sprinklers are running every day and they're just turning purple from the bottom and working their way up. So I've had that in the country in the same situation where they're just tight. So air circulation makes a difference. And I think in windbreaks where you just space, we go more 18 to 20 foot spacing instead of 12 to 15. We just want more air circulation to prevent that. Even with ponderosas, out west, we're fine with that, but really Grand Island East and York East, we do have blights on our ponderosas at times, especially as they get older. And so we try to give them more air circulation and spacing than others. And then I'm just going to list, of course, these aren't for windbreak trees or Christmas tree industry, but I'm going to show a few cultivars that I just really like that are either well known or may not be. So this is a weeping white spruce, and it grows about a foot a year or less, depending on its site. Pretty well known. So well known that it's hard to get enough of them. The demand is higher than supply right now, but really a cool tree. They grow vertically, but the sides are pendulous. So you get your weeping structure on the sides, but the leader just keeps going up. Where a lot of weeping trees, the whole tree goes every direction. But weeping white spruce are one of those that kind of keep going up. Myers spruce. Let's see, I better keep moving. This time's going by fast, Justin. Myers spruce. I planted these about 20 years ago here. Not this picture, but some Myers spruce. They're from Russia, so again, cold is not an issue. And I just had let them grow, and I thought, man, you guys are pokey. You're growing about 4 inches a year, and they didn't do much. Now, after 20 years, they're probably, I'm guessing, 12 feet tall, but they're starting to grow faster. And I really like them. And we actually have a supplier now we can get Myers. We did some liners of them as well, and they're doing all right. So I'm kind of getting into maybe we start using them either as a windbreak tree once they get 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 foot tall, so they have some establishment on size, or if someone wants to just experiment them at any size. They may work for a Christmas tree. I don't know if the needle retention is good or bad, but they are a cool tree. The cone is long and slender, not like a white pine, but it kind of reminds me of that in a way before they open up. So just a unique tree. It isn't pokey either. It's kind of a firm needle, but not where it draws blood like some of them can if you touch them at the wrong time. So this one is interesting. Years ago, I think Justin asked me, "What do you think of this?" I said, "Too slow. I'm never going to do any." Well, I've changed my mind. So can I do that? Siberian spruce. This is a bad picture. I don't have a lot of pictures out there. So we experimented with this a couple years ago, and we sold them all except for maybe one that we got to get planted. But Siberian spruce seemed to, again, cold obviously is not a problem from where they're native to, but they have a bluish gray cast. I wouldn't call them a fast grower. The needle length is kind of like an oriental spruce. It isn't a real wide group, but super hardy for winter. And I'm just curious to see as time goes by, if it's the summer that hurts them again because of the heat that they wouldn't like. But I have some on a landscape I looked at this summer actually, and it took me a little bit. I go, what is that tree? And she wasn't sure. And I said, is it a Siberian spruce? And she said, yep, that's what it is. So it's up around a sand pit up by Clark's, gets a little shading in it in the afternoon. And I think that's probably a benefit with some of these trees that like less heat and more cold. But again, something to play with. Arctos is just a selection that came out of the Siberian spruce that a nursery did that's a little bluer yet than the native. Serbian spruce, native to, again, overseas. It's from Europe, but tends to do all right here. At one time, I kind of was giving up on it back in 2012. I lost a few of them in the drought, but there they are in the pasture, so I really can't fault them. I think if they're in a yard, a little more protection, they probably would do better. Might have been slow, but you can see in that picture, they still look pretty. And you see the bicoloring, the undersides of the needles are white banded, so it gives a little bit of a silver underside, and the top is dark green. Softer needles, more so than most spruce, so it is a little bit softer. But I would recommend that more for in an acreage with protection of other trees, maybe a little option for water on a drought year in the park or an in-town yard as opposed to out in the wide open. And there's the weeping version of it again. You can see that central leader is staying vertical. So there's one called Bruns, Weeping Serbian Spruce Bruns. And I think it's supposed to be a little narrower, like 2 foot wide, almost like Taylor juniper growing straight up with the side branches down. So these trees aren't for everyone, but they work maybe by a front door, off a corner, or by a patio or a deck. It isn't something you just put out in the front yard, obviously, but there's situations by a pond, a stream, something like that. Okay, blue spruce. I don't have to say a lot. Everyone pretty much knows what blue spruce are, but there's a couple new selections that have come out in the last 5 years, and these are two of them. Avatar is one of them. It's very blue, and the needles are wider than typical, and sometimes even taper a little bit, but really pretty blue. That's a nice looking blue. And then Bonnie blue is a white blue. They liken that to a hoopside color, only in a fat Albert shape. So you have the nice full pyramidal look of a fat Albert, but the color of a hoopside blue spruce, which is more of a whitish blue, and then not the pendulous habit that the hoopside would do. So that's all I'm talking on blue spruce, because everyone pretty well knows those, and we're still treading lightly just because we don't know where the disease issues are going to end up with them too. And they don't like drought, so I've lost some in some of my own pasture with drought because I don't water them.
So Todd,
Okay,
would
yeah.
you say the Black Hills spruce is more drought tolerant than our Colorado spruce?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I had no issues in my pasture with Black Hills in those years that I lost blue spruce and white pine. Yeah, yeah. And some other people might be able to tell you the same, how they've done in windbreak settings like that too. But yeah, and then quick too, we'll go through some pine. I like the pine family. It used to be where all we thought we had were Ponderosa, Austrian, Scotch, and whites, and that isn't the case. There have been some new selections, new cultivars, dwarf ones. It's just a fun family, and the Scotch and Austrian to me were kind of the perfect windbreak tree before their problems because they stayed full to the ground, they grew quickly, and were easily tolerant of drought conditions. So what do we do in place of pine for windbreak? So we kind of, and I'll get to some options here, but that's kind of been one of the questions. The Swiss stone pine is not one that we use for windbreak situations. It's more of an ornamental tree, or I'll use them in landscapes right off a corner of a house, right off a corner of a deck or patio. They're slower growing, so they're kind of fun that they give you that look, but they don't mature quickly and overtake the house. So Chalet is one of them that I like. And then Algonquin Pillar is another one on the right in that picture. I think I have maybe Prairie Statesman, another selection that Todd West did with North Dakota State. All three of those are very similar. I think Prairie Statesman stays the narrowest. Algonquin Pillar might be next, and then Chalet, or vice versa on those last two. But still, they're not wide. They're going to be more of an upright cylinder shape, soft. Just love those trees. Another favorite. I could do those, and I think Silver Ray Korean pine in about every landscape around a house, just to get an evergreen up around the foundation. But again, nothing quick, and that's what we want. They're in that 4 to 6 inch a year range. The inside needles turn yellow, but they aren't like a white pine where it's their 2-year-old needles. These are more like 3 or 4-year-old needles turn in fall color. So they stay fuller than a columnar white pine would. Pinyon pine, just listing that one. You don't see them much here, but again, out west. We've used some, or I should say, gotten some to folks out in Scotts Bluff area. Colorado, they're native to Colorado. They grow faster in Colorado. I grew them when I was in high school. So from seed, talk about learning patience. That and bristlecone pine I grew from seed. And they were screaming along at 2 inches a year on a good year. And then I drowned them by year 3, just because neither one of them liked to be grown in containers. But nonetheless, these are some pinions I have now in my pasture. And that's some old pictures there that I think I planted 9 of them 25 years ago out there. And they're all of maybe 9 foot tall now, or 10 foot tall. They're not what I'd call windbreak tree or Christmas tree, but they're more of a shrub. And when you see them in the southern slopes of Colorado, a lot of shrubby pinyon pine there. But interesting nonetheless. There's a lot of history on the nuts, the edible nuts, that the Indians would eat the nuts. There's chocolate covered nuts somewhere. I can't even find them anymore. I remember I used to eat chocolate covered pinyon nuts, which was really just like an M&M. But I can't find a source for them right now. So that was kind of fun. So an interesting tree. Here's my other favorite of the pine that I mentioned besides Swiss stone, Silver Ray Korean. And really the straight Korean is beautiful also, mostly a darker green needle. The Silver Ray has a more prominent white banding on the underside, so it gives it more of a blue cast. So there's Silver Ray, and there's one called Morris Blue that's out on the market too that does the same thing. But look at those shapes. I mean, the layered open look, kind of like a Japanese white pine, but fuller. In the picture on the left, that's the fall needles. You see some yellowish in there. That was taken with a lot of fall color in it, which again is pretty if you know what's going on and it doesn't scare you to think you're getting disease going into October. But soft needled, doesn't grow as fast as other pine. If you get 6 or 8 inches a year, that's kind of typical for a faster growth year. But off a corner of a house, off a deck, sometimes by a front door if you've got the right layout there. So we've used them in different situations there as well. Japanese white pine, a cool pine, way tougher than I used to give it credit for. I've planted this on the top of a hill on the north side of a house with nothing but fields to the north. I've told this story a lot, so Justin, you've probably heard this. After 20 years, it was 20 by 20, and it went through the 2012 drought and didn't burn at all. It just amazed me. So ever since then, I've been using them. It's just finding good ones. I try to find ones that have some thickness to them so they aren't too open, but yet not sheared. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. That happens to be at a house in York here that we used again by the front door entryway. and just love how that's layering off and looking natural. You can see Japanese white pine zigzag a little bit too, where the leader goes like this, because that's how they grow a little more in the wild at times. This might have been one selection called Nagishi. You hear a lot of Japanese names on the varieties. Fukuzumi, Miyajima, they're all good varieties, and they all kind of have their own characteristics, whether they're a shrub form or an ornamental tree look where it zigzags up and grows slowly, or where they flatten out like a chair in a way. But beautiful needle color again, and they'll cone somewhat with age too. The native ponderosa pine, I think this picture is either taken out at Fort Robinson. I think it's Fort Robinson or else Merritt, one of the two, somewhere in those areas. And I've learned to appreciate ponderosa way more than I did earlier in my nurseryman days, I guess you could say. I always thought, well, you're just kind of open. You get disease issues here, and we'll go with something better. And now I really like ponderosa. When you walk through a forest of those out in Pine Ridge and you smell the needles and the forest smell of those, I just really like them. They are self-delimbing. You can see in those pictures, people don't go in and cut those. They'll usually just turn brown and drop off. So that either makes it good or bad for a windbreak tree here. I always say it's actually good, because as it does that, it opens up more air circulation for the concolors or the blue spruce or whatever, junipers even, that are in those windbreaks with them, so that you get better air circulation in and around the base. And in the trees defense too, that also helps them survive the grassland fires when they have them out there, because the thick bark helps repel the fire. And then if they've already delimbed those bottom branches, it kind of stays low, it goes by and moves on. So there's some reasons for nature to do what it does. We just need to study it.
Yeah,
But that's kind of pretty. A whole grouping of ponderosas is really nice.
I love that. And you can see they're a little more scattered here in our native lands, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Bruce Hoffman asked the question, ponderosa seemed to have a big growth spurt a few years after planting. Do you recommend that growers maintain a certain standard length of the leader to avoid those huge growth spaces between whorls?
I'm yes, you can do that. I kind of let them just do their things. I see that in white pine when we grow them here too, where that on a good year, they might shoot 3 feet. And other years, like 22, I was having them shoot 6 inches. And I just figure it's the way nature is. So I let it do its thing. But yes, Bruce, that would be something you could do. You could top it a little or pinch the buds. But then you almost want to be sure the next year to kind of thin those double or triple leaders out. And that's why I don't like to recommend it to too many folks, because it's hard to get back and clean that up.
Yeah.
But yeah, good question.
One more, Todd, just from me. Is there a seed source opportunity with these trees, or like how do you track them down? It seemed like our Nebraska trees would be better, but
Yeah. And in fact, Bruce and I just had this conversation yesterday, because where we get our ponderosas, it's out of Evergreen Nursery in Wisconsin, and they use Scopalorum seed source, which is the Black Hills, Fort Robinson area seed source. And they are, for some reason, the drought has affected seed and they can't get it for 2 years. So they were going to an Arizona K-Bob seed source.
okay.
And they said that source is not good for Eastern Colorado. And I figured, well, that wouldn't work for me either. So I pay a lot of attention to seed sourcing. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was news to me that there's 3 or 4 varieties of ponderosa pine.
Yeah.
Naturally.
There's some from the Pacific Northwest too, and I don't like those either. The needles are way longer, and then they don't like our winters, of course, like because ponderosa, I think, is one of the most widely distributed conifer in North America.
Yeah.
And you don't think of it going all the way to the West Coast, but I've seen it out there in Oregon.
Right.
Yeah. Red pine, this is to me what I call the Great Lakes state version of the ponderosa. So it's a close relative of the ponderosa, just in Michigan, native to sandy soil. We've got one planted here that's going on, I think, 15 or 20 years and doing fine. I just noticed on some of our last year crop that we're growing that they have some pine tip moth in them. So I see that in ponderosa once in a while in production, but once I get them planted, I don't see it that often. And I want to say someone told me, and maybe you know, Justin, does the pine tip moth fly at a certain elevation, like 3 foot and lower or something? And I could be confusing it, but that might be why I don't see it in older trees. But
I
one of
don't
those
know that.
insects does something like that. I need to talk to someone that knows more than I do on the entomology part. Southwestern white pine, great tree. That one, if you want the white pine look in a windbreak, I've done the southwestern white pine with no issues in drought. I've got them 30 years old in my pasture, and the only problem I've had with them is in some of the ice storms and blizzards, I've had busted branches out in them, but I've had that on junipers. So I really can't fault them for that. They're soft needled, they're relatively fast growing, not as fast as the true white, but close. And so these are native to Apache National Forest in Arizona. So here we are back down to Arizona, but their elevation is 7,000 and greater. So just because it's from New Mexico or Arizona doesn't turn me off necessarily. Some seed sources in those states do, but this has done great for me since I can remember, since even high school growing these. They just do really well. And I don't have any disease issues, no blights on 5 needle pine again. So these are 5 needle pine, and so we can delete that. No wilt yet that I know of. I don't know if there's enough of them out there to tell, but the wilt is what we're all praying doesn't affect our pine. That's what we're hoping. So southwestern white pine, I do like that for windbreaks. That may be a tree for the Christmas tree industry too. I keep forgetting to mention that as I go through this, but they have a nice natural shape. You can shear them if you want to. I'm liking the more natural shapes for Christmas trees, even when we get them in, because you can hang ornaments in those gaps in there. But to each their own on that. I am not a Christmas tree grower, so I don't know what the public all wants. So,
Todd,
and then on white pine, most people are familiar with those. I love white pine, especially when they're huge and majestic and 100 foot tall and 50 foot wide, and even maybe trimmed up as a shade tree. It's just a soft yellow needle blanket underneath for mulch. It's just a beautiful tree as it gets older and fast growing, hates drought. So that's one that I have not had success with on the drought years. I don't lose all of them, but it's nothing for me to cut 1 or 2 or 3 down in those drought years in my pasture. And I noticed in 22, well, last year even, they were shooting 2 to 3 inches of growth in my pasture. This year they went back to the 6 to 12 inches of growth. So what a difference rain makes. You just can't water like rain does.
Hey, Todd, before you move on those
Yeah.
southwestern white pines, do you worry about double leaders in those, or that's how they naturally grow? Do you just let them do their thing?
No, I try as long as I can reach them. I try to keep
Okay.
double leaders. Yeah, they're almost a little multi-trunked at times. Yeah, that's a good point. I've seen that on Vanderwolf pyramids too, that are out in landscapes. Um, yeah, I like to trim them out as long as I can reach them. Most of mine in my pasture were past where I could reach them and are now multi-leadered and still are doing okay. But if I was particular and said I can't stand that look, I would have gone up and trimmed them out. But when they're 20, 30 foot tall, they're kind of on their own after that.
Is the southwestern related to the bristlecone? Because they're 5 needle too.
No, the bristlecone would be its own. That's Aristata. Southwestern white would be related to the limber pine. So those two are the most closely related. So you'd have, and at 5 needles, the Koreans, the whites, the Southwestern, the limbers, those would be the main white, 5 needle pine group. Swiss stone, I think, is 5 needle. So, yeah, bristlecone is actually a 2 needle pine. So pinyon is a 1 or 2 needle, and bristlecone is a 2. And then those two are closer related to each other. Yeah. And there's just has to be a grouping of white pine in my pasture that love that look. You know, you mow a trail through that, a walking trail, and it's just kind of fun. You hear the wind blow through them almost like aspen. It's a different sound, but you just hear the breeze go through them. Weeping white pine. If that isn't a snuffleupagus look, that's a big one. That's one of the first ones I planted about 30 some years ago, and it's 20 to 30 foot tall and wide. And oddly enough, that's on the top of a hill south of the Waco interchange, somewhere in that area at a house, and very exposed. And it's amazing how tough those are. Domingo pine, this is the one pine that I'm really well, not one, ponderosa too, but I'm recommending for windbreaks. It's a cross between a white pine and a Mexican pine. And we've put them wide open areas, full northwest exposure on the top of a hill, and they've done just fine. So that's my replacement for the Vanderwolf pyramid. We use these instead of Vanderwolfs. Get about a foot a year on average. They stay thicker than a Vanderwolf as they mature, and I haven't had a winter kill them down to snow level like I have on Vanderwolfs years ago. Back in the 90s, I haven't since, but and they tolerate moisture a little more. Vanderwolfs hate heavy, wet clay soils in town, in irrigated landscapes, and these tolerate it better. I don't want to say they love it, but they tolerate it better. But a nice blue-gray needle as well. I think I'm getting down to the tail end, so I'll kind of go through these, and then if we have some questions. Douglas fir, another tree that I never gave a lot of credit to for a windbreak tree till I looked at mine in the pasture after 30 years, and I wasn't even using these as windbreak. And I go, you guys have been out here for 30 years with no attention and exposed and no watering, and you look great. So last few years we've been using them in windbreaks, and I really wouldn't have recommended them as a windbreak tree, but we have some. We planted some north of Henderson 2 or 3 years ago on a bare open field again, and they went through the 22 drought, or we planted them 22, so they went through that year, and then some windy winters since then, and they look great. So I'm kind of impressed with these. Would I do a whole windbreak of them? No, we always diversify. You want to mix things up just in case you have that winter that they don't like. But beautiful cones for decorating for Christmas too. And they would work for Christmas trees. Needle retention in the winter, I think, would depend on seed source again. I think you need the Rocky Mountain strain for sure. There's a weeping one called Graceful Grace that kind of keeps its leader, kind of doesn't. As it gets older, I've seen it kind of wobble a little bit and do this more so than the weeping white spruce, but beautiful weeping tree with side pendulous branches. Gets a little wider than the 2 foot, probably more like 4 or 5. And then the bald cypress. So there's our other deciduous evergreen besides the larch that super tough. I have had winters kill leaders on young trees, but once they mature and get some size to them, I've had them go through all kinds of stuff, including droughts. But I wouldn't put them out in the pasture necessarily. I think they like a little more moisture than that on the dry years. Obviously, they grow in the bogs of the south. So, but cool tree. And then I think we're winding down here. Hemlocks, the Canadian hemlock. These happen to be a picture of my in-laws side of the family in Fremont, Nebraska. So that's a hedge that someone planted across the fence. So I took a picture of it because I hadn't seen any that size that looked that good. And so we're kind of playing with hemlocks and some landscapes, and as long as they're in a shaded area, they do great. Getting good stock in is probably the kicker again. I don't have real good sources all the time, so we're starting to grow our own hemlocks, and they're a foot tall, so it's going to be a while. But we're growing them in the root maker system, and I'm really liking how they're looking. So often we get them in and they burn back, and they don't have the best roots, so I think they drown in the nursery. So we're paying attention to this tree. I think it'd be great for a shade landscape. We just need to get good sources for them. Yeah. And I think that's it. So we didn't do too bad. We got
Yeah,
2 minutes
Todd.
to 12-ish.
I love it. Wow, that was awesome, man. That's so
I talked fast, but there's a lot to go over, but hopefully that
yeah,
helped.
you and I'm sure you didn't even cover everything you could have there. So different species. Like a
Yeah.
couple I noted here, like limber pine. That's probably more western Nebraska, right? But so like
It
with southwestern white, that's better for us in the east, or
Yeah, I have a couple of limbers in this pasture, just kind of behind in that shot across the draw that have done all right. There's 2 of them. Early in their years, they got needle cast quite a bit, so they defoliated the bottom branches. I never sprayed them, and then they've just recovered, and they're slow. They're maybe in the teens of feet tall and really layered, but beautiful trees in their own right too. Limbers are a pretty tree.
yeah, right on. And then what about arborvitae? Um, how do you
I,
use that or think about it?
Yeah, I am just not a fan of arborvitae. I say that, and then I say you can't use green giant. Then I was in a landscape 2 weeks ago. They have beautiful green giants, 20 foot tall. So I said, no, those
Wow.
don't work here. But yours did.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's always an
right.
isolated case.
Right.
What the winters can do to them, they just make them so split and open on those heavy, wet snow winters. If they were trimmed to a central leader, like we talked on the juniper, I'd say that would be the way to go. Yeah. And there is a selection out of North Dakota State again, called North Pole. And that one would be the selection I would go with if I were to plant them here.
Awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that seems like one that we see a lot in the urban landscape here in Lincoln and Omaha for side yard screens and stuff, but it's
Yeah.
kind of prone to our winter issues, isn't it? Ice storm.
Yeah. And you know why you see it a lot? It's sold in all the chain stores. They have a whole group of them of all different kinds, and
Yeah,
they're beautiful at that time.
right.
So they're an easy sell. And I'm not running them down. It's just
Yeah.
there's better choices. There's just better choices.
Nope, right on. We have a question here. And everybody, hey, I'll just remind you if you're a certified arborist, put your name and certification number here in the chat, and then I will collect that and submit it for certification CEUs. But here's another question, Todd. Do seeds collected from bald cypress grow well? And can people do that at home or?
You could. I have not done those. That would be a good question for Heather Byers because she does our seedlings that we buy of bald cypress from her. The thing, and I've done a lot of different conifers where I've opened to see if the seed was viable, and more often than not, it's hollow. And I don't know on the bald cypress. We actually have one out here. We're just going to crack open when it's mature and just see what it's like because I haven't done that either. But yeah, if the seed is, cut a few of the seeds open and see if they're hollow, if there's some meat inside, and if there is, put it through the stratification period, and absolutely you can grow it. Throw it in the refrigerator or put it in a pot outside over winter. Just put a bunch of them in a tray outside over winter and cover them up with leaves or mulch. That's your natural stratification. And then in the spring, just uncover them and let them come up naturally. So, yeah,
All
yeah,
right, love that. Do you see regeneration in your pasture from some of these odd
not a
nuts?
single one. No,
Okay.
I haven't. I think they're all hollow seed. The white pine usually doesn't have live seed, and the ponderosas that I have in there, I've just done in the last 10 years, so they aren't old enough yet. Because those would probably be the only ones that would likely have regeneration. Yeah.
I'll ask him.
Most of the time, I don't even see cones on a lot of my trees out there. We don't get a lot of cones on most evergreens here, like you see in
Right.
the wild. So, yeah.
What do you recommend for time of year to be planting, Todd, for evergreens?
Yeah, really, I do my own anytime the ground isn't frozen. So I'll do my own in the fall because that's about the only time I have. Ideally, I like to do it in the spring because that's the best availability. That's when we get the B&B stock in, and then it can root out in your landscape instead of in our mulch beds. So if it's containerized, it doesn't matter so much. We plant them all summer long, and again, we really emphasize that do not overwater when we summer plant because we all want to water when it's hot out. I just can't emphasize that. Don't water evergreens much enough. But yeah, I like planting them any time of year, but my prime time is earlier than later would probably be the way I would go, especially on B&B, so you don't stress the roots so much.
Okay, I used to hear from nurserymen that said, don't plant evergreens after late summer. But like you're saying, if they're containerized and ready to go, don't worry
Right.
too much about that.
Yeah.
Maybe they
Most of
meant don't
mine I've
plant them.
done as of late in the fall, whether it be a Nordman fir, a silver fir, ones that were left over, B&B, roots hanging out of the root balls. I take them home and plant them. And I've been successful, and I'm no better than anyone else on digging a hole. I mean, we all have to do the same hole and mulch and water it in. And in fact, I did it the year of the drought year, even the 22, and might have lost one, but for the most part, it was just more watering than I would have liked to have done in a pasture where the hose doesn't reach. But
Right. Yeah.
overall, I kind of try to prove worst case scenarios that it's still possible, and it was. Yeah.
All right, Todd, we've reached 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time here. There's a
Absolutely.
questions about, do you have a list of these trees? And I will tell everybody that this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on the Nebraska Forest Service YouTube channel eventually. So you'll find it there. You can go back through it and get all the names of the trees. I assume they could go to your nursery website and see
Website.
the trees.
Yeah.
Or...
Yeah. Or email us too, if you have a variety you're looking for or question on one, I can answer the emails too.
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Todd, so much. This was fantastic. I always get enthused about evergreens when I hear you talk about them. So
It's been an addiction for me. So
yeah, I love it. That's a good addiction.
yeah.
And thank you all for attending today. You can join again November 14th. We'll do fall fall and winter tree care things and we touched on them here today. So thank you all for joining and we'll sign off. Thanks, Todd.
Yep. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, everyone.